Agriculture and Oversight Committees. Congressman, I'm glad to see you. On the heels of Priscilla's report there and your familiarity with this story about Mr. Greene, the tragedy that happened 2 years ago this month, where does police reform stand in Congress? Any kind of legislation being passed or agreed upon to get to the president's desk?
Well, Alex, first of all, it is just heartbreaking to see a man literally pleading for his life, asking for grace, asking for mercy, and then just being killed, and killed in a way with just contempt and no regard for life. I think this is just, again, shocking the nation. The House, as you know, has passed the Police Injustice Act that Karen Bass led. She has worked with senators on it. She worked with Republicans on it. All it says is that force should be an absolute last resort, that officers shouldn't be allowed to take action like this. There's some very common sense reforms. It's time for the Senate to take it up and pass it.
So you say that it's very common sense. What are the expectations? I mean, do you hear rumblings about its interpretation in the Senate and if they can get behind this simple common sense reform, like no excessive force, folks?
Exactly. And some of the officers themselves want this. They don't want escalations. I mean, you think about the tragedy here. You had an unarmed black man who ran a traffic light and ends up dead. I mean, everyone in this country should say that's not the outcome that we want. We want to have de-escalation. We don't want police using chokeholds on individuals. We need to have accountability of police officers who act in this way so that there is reform, and force should be a last resort. These are common sense principles. The challenges, as you know, the filibuster and the Republicans in the Senate have just not been willing to move.
So when you know Republicans are getting a look at video like this, I mean, what is their reaction to it? The Republicans in the Senate, you would think, would say, yeah, this is awful, and have the same just human gut reaction that you have and I have looking at it.
Absolutely. And so many law enforcement officials, people in my district, have the same reaction.
Of course.
Because there are a lot of law enforcement who do honorable work, who do good work, who would never, ever come close to doing something like this. And they see this taking place, and it's something that they're ashamed of. And what they're saying is, let's have the reforms that are necessary. And what we're talking about are common sense reforms, but the Republicans have politicized it as being sort of you're anti-law enforcement if you're for these reforms. No, you're actually for law enforcement. You're for 95% of the law enforcement officials who want to see honorable work under ethical standards, to have a two-state solution to end the blockade in Gaza, but to also recognize that there shouldn't be Hamas rockets coming against Israel. I mean, this is a complicated process, and we need our Secretary of State engaged there. What I will say, and have said clearly, is that any of our aid needs to be consistent with the Leahy Law and the Arms Export Control Act, and it should not be used in any way that violates human rights.
Okay. To that point, Senator Bernie Sanders, as you know, has introduced a resolution of disapproval on a $735 million U.S. arms sale to Israel. Your Democratic colleagues, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Mark Pocan, Rashida Tlaib, they introduced a similar resolution in the House. Where do you stand on this effort to block the Israel arms sale?
Well, I'm where Senator Kaine and Senator Chris Murphy is that first we need to be briefed on it. I would not have approved any sale during the violence, but my understanding is this is a year from now. So we need to know, what is this about? Are we going to make sure that anything is consistent with the Leahy and Arms Export Act? But I really think we have to first take a step back and try to understand what is going to advance the interests of peace. And that is first having Secretary Blinken actively involved, or an envoy actively involved, in trying to get back to a two-state solution, recognizing that Israel is an ally, but that we need to make sure all of our aid is consistent with the Leahy Law and the Arms Export Control Act, and there aren't human rights violations, and also making sure that their security is considered.
Yeah. Okay, let's turn back to the Capitol riot. The prospects for the January 6th Independent Commission getting 60 votes to pass in the Senate appear bleak as of now, certainly. If the commission bill fails, what happens next? Do you want to see Democrats form a select committee or amend the commission bill to gain Republican support somehow? You think that's even tenable?
Alex, I think this point is worth making. The speaker has bent over backwards to try to get Republicans. There have been so many people like me in the caucus putting pressure on her saying, let's just do this. We can't wait. And she has tried time and again to make this bipartisan because she loves this institution. She loves the Capitol. She's not looking in any way to score political points. And you know what no one understands is what is the objection? What is, I mean, I keep hearing we don't have the votes, McConnell saying this. I've never heard a substantive argument. Why wouldn't you want a commission to look into the attacks on the Capitol, an attack on our democracy?
Okay, I'm going to offer this up. Congressman Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's among the House Republicans who voted against the commission. Let's all take a listen to what she said earlier this week. She's claiming that it's the Capitol rioters who are being treated unfairly. Yeah, here's that.
While it's catch and release for domestic terrorists, Antifa, BLM, the people who breached the Capitol on January 6th are being abused, some even being held for 23 hours a day in solitary confinement.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tells the public radio show Latino USA that many people refuse to admit how the attack has, quote, deeply affected lawmaking and policymaking. Marjorie Taylor Greene, I mean, she's part of that group of Republicans who've certainly been defiant, not just about the Capitol riot, but other things, and that would include, of course, the pandemic. Several Republican lawmakers gleefully defying mask rules on the House floor this week. Put this all together. How does behavior denying facts, denying truth, impact the legislative process?
Well, it's made it almost dysfunctional to work with some of those members. Here is the ultimate irony. The Republican Party claims that they're the law enforcement party, that they're the party that is pro-police. The people who died because of those attacks were police officers. I don't understand how you can claim to be pro-police or pro-law enforcement and not want a commission to investigate people who killed the police officer, who led to the death of the police officer. How are you in any way justifying that violence? It is beyond the pale. I used to think there used to be one line in American democracy that we believe we solve disputes based on the rule of law, based on a civility and decorum. And that used to be conservative thinking. And they've totally thrown that out of the water. Some of these people, Edmund Burke and conservatism wouldn't recognize them. They would be embarrassed by them. And it's a real crisis. We don't have a conservative party right now in this country. The Republican Party is not a conservative party. You can call it whatever else, but it's not conservative.
Yeah, we keep hearing that over and over again from multiple sources. I thank you as well for your contribution on this, Congressman Khanna. It's always good to see you.